Here with Richard Winger, Mayor of Vero Beach. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, as always, Mark.
I thought we could have a conversation with you about where you see the city now and what you see as important in the next year of your term, of your two-year term, which will begin here in November. So in terms of where the city's at now, let's talk briefly about the electric utility. I know that that's before the Public Service Commission, and another case may soon be before the courts, so there's a lot you can't talk about. But what can you tell us about where the city's at in addressing its electric utility issue?
Well, as you know, the city has gone down on the power rates in January and in June, a cumulative total of 5.6%, when we still have a long way to go. The city is actively involved in two thrusts, and I went over them in a paper in February. I believe it's still on the city, covb.org. And I said what we had to do is we had to change the governance system to utility authority, and there will be a lot of work determining what that authority looks like. But my view of it is, as long as the return on assets, in other words, the cumulative preferred dividend is paid the owners being the people of Vero Beach, we can have about any kind of governance it would take. I personally would favor some sort of governance where the 60% outside the city had 60% of the votes, as long as the return on the $120 million worth of capital is there. And we've talked about this in public, and I've said this before. I said it in February, I keep saying it, and I think that's something we should do. Our history has been that city councils have made many poor decisions with FMPA repeatedly, with OUC. Not that I have anything against OUC, it's just the contract is too expensive. With Florida Power and Light, we could have taken steps to get us farther than we did. I think we went at it the wrong way. But regardless, I think you got to change the governance, and I think you got to find a way to get business people governing the thing rather than having it a political football. Mm-hmm. The other thing we have to do is lower the rates, and in Peter Gorey's 18 points, there's a number of nickel-dime things that haven't been done yet that can get the rates down 3 or 4%. Personally, I would borrow $3 million a year for a few years until the debt on Stanton 1 is paid off. You've got to remember that we're paying $5 million a year on the utility in debt reduction. We owe $32 million right now. We have one of the best ratios of capital to debt of any utility in Florida, really, and I'll say any utility in Florida. We're very low debt. And to keep paying the debt down, what you could do is that $3 million a year that what we're buying is transformers and items like that. And those items then are capitalized and put on the books as fixed investment. But we're paying for fixed investment out of cash. That $3 million could lower the rate 4.5%. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, the major two items that are out there before 2019 are closing or mothballing the plant, and it should be mothballed, not torn down. And then the other one is renegotiating with OUC, and that is doable. I can tell you it's doable. And so they supply 60% of the power. It's too expensive. There are things they'd like to have, things we'd like to have. Without getting into any details, we can get a lot closer to Florida Power and Light. Can we get to Florida Power and Light? Probably not before 2019. Mm-hmm. But we can get a lot closer with the right kind of decisions. Again, going back to the governance, I would rather have business professionals running and governing the utility than a city council.
What do you say to those who dismiss the proposal for utility authority, describing it as just another layer of government?
It perplexes me. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had the same thing. I've been talking about a stormwater utility, and they say, well, it's just another layer of government, but yet the lagoon is dying. And if you listen to political arguments, and you listen to them in Washington or Tallahassee, you'll get caveats. It's just another layer of government. It's not small government. Whatever it happens to be, and I just take them as cliche and saws and cheap responses. But the reality is, I think the people, the 60% outside the city, should have a vote in everything that's decided, with the one exception that I think there has to be a return on the investment that has been made. And you know, people say, well, the investment was made out of rates. Well, that's not totally true. But if you go to Publix or you go to Sam's or you buy something from Procter & Gamble, they make a profit, they reinvest the profit, and they make their product line or their system bigger. And that's happened here, but the people who own the system are the people of Vero Beach. And they're entitled to a dividend, not a transfer, but a dividend on that investment that they've made. And yes, people pay rates. Yes, people pay for a can of green beans at Publix. But, you know, that doesn't entitle them. But I would like to entitle them, all of the people, the 100% of the people. I think it's necessary.
And you could do it in a way where the 60% of the customers outside the city limits could have roughly 60% of the voice in how that utility is run.
Right, and how it's run is everything from setting rates to government oversight, to what the new investments will be. It could even include, as long as any capital is refunded, it could even include selling it later on. There'd be no restriction. There are 21 or 22 of these around the state of Florida. They're all different. There's no simple one that we can just copy. Orlando Public Utility Commission, I believe their mayor there sits on it. But there's not, that would all have to be decided. Who sits on it, what power they have. I personally would have the utility authority bring in a professional management company to run the utility. What happens with the county? Who does the accounting? Does the city continue to do accounting, or is there an outside accounting firm? All those things would have to be determined. And it's probably as complicated as everything we've been through up to now to establish such an entity.
But it would address the issue of what some people call taxation without representation. I realize there's a whole other debate about whether that's a tax or whether it's a profit, and you were addressing that.
It's a profit.
Yeah.
So, you know, our profit is 6%. Florida, generally across the United States of America, and certainly in Florida, the Public Service Commission allows 12% profit on invested capital. Here we're dealing with 6%. Now, the reason we take a lower rate is because we pay too much for power. We've got to take as low as we can. But I pretty believe in the free economy. I believe in business. That's where I've come from. And I think if you invest money, you are entitled to a return. This house you're in, I live in because I get a return from my assets that I have invested, whether it's Nexera or Southern Company or Norfolk and Southern Railroad. I mean, I expect a return.
So however, one might see that issue, the fact that 60% of the people feel unrepresented in decisions about how that utility is run. And this utility authority would address that concern.
It would address that concern and my concern that city councils are not don't politically have the right background. I mean, we have 7 people running for city council this time. There's probably, without naming names, 2, well, I will name one, Mr. Kramer, but there's probably only one additional person that has the background in the world out there in finance and management that really is qualified to run a utility.
So you would hope to also improve the management of the utility by going to an authority?
I don't think we could help but improve the management.
Yeah, I hear that. Right. I think most people would agree. Yeah. You mentioned a stormwater utility. Let's touch on that, if you will.
Well, you know, the city's done a number of things. The deep injection well, we're pumping water out of the main relief canal and selling it for irrigation. That water doesn't go in the lagoon, obviously. We were one of the first with a fertilizer ordinance, and we have as strong a fertilizer ordinance as anybody along the Treasure Coast. I was part of voting for that. You might see my picture at the Oslo boat ramp, you know, because I don't believe in dredging that. But you know, the city is involved in a biomass involvement with 5 other cities where we're going to take the sludge out of the sewer plant and it'll be converted to mulch, first for agricultural use, but eventually for household use. And the city is involved, and the governor's chief of staff was good enough to help us get the Department of Health and Environmental Protection and have them look favorably on our application, which is forthcoming for our STEP system. In other words, the system of taking the effluent, the liquid, out of septic tanks, and it will be north of Bethel Creek, that area of the city, 132 homes.
And that's a test area, right?
Well, it's a pilot project, but we're going to go for permitting the entire city with the idea. And we are going to monitor results, realizing it takes a long time for polluted ground seepage to go through the ground, to get into the river, and therefore have a reduction. But this year in the budget, one of the things I failed at, and politics, I'm a middle of the road, or I don't think it's any secret, and there's always give and take, and there were a couple things that I lost on, and one was we're only putting $100,000 into baffle boxes this year. Now that's not quite true, because we're putting $100,000 into fixing problems we have on the 20th Street area with some failure. But essentially, the program we have will take 19 years to move from 32% baffle boxes to 69% baffle boxes. These are the outfalls. And you've got to remember that when all of this part of Florida, and Vero Beach in particular, was laid out, the idea was to get the water off US 1 or Indian River Boulevard. And so all the water goes to the lagoon, and that water carries with it grass clippings, oil from trucks, all manner of mud, leaves, you name it. And at this point in time, we have 66% of the water that's leaving the city. And by the way, we're ahead of the curve, we're ahead of most cities, is going into the river, and anything in the world that's in that water just floats in there. And with technology, we can get out the solids, and with type 2 baffle boxes, we can limit the damage to the lagoon. Now, ideally, if you were building a new community, you'd make lots of lakes and ponds, but we can't do that in Vero Beach. So it's more important to us than, let's say, Grand Harbor, more important that we baffle all of the boxes, of all the water coming out. There's one at 19th across from 19th Street, across from the power plants, the newest one we put in. And so my idea, it's not my idea, Sebastian and Felsmer have one, is to have a stormwater unit, utility I'll call it, for the period of time it takes to get these outfalls properly baffled and restricted. And after that it would be sunset. And roughly speaking, if you collected for each sewer hookup $3 to $5, let's say you collected $5, and if we have a month, what would happen is you'd have $60 a year, you'd have $700,000 or $800,000 a year, and my goal would be to get to where we plan to get in 19 years. I mean, 19 years I'm not going to be alive, obviously, but to wait 19 years to fix a lagoon that is dying, to me, is criminal. And it's a fee. It's a user's fee. I think it would be fair, but there's those that call it tax. I mean, you get back to your cliches. I don't want it because it's not small government, or I don't want it because it's a tax. I don't think there's anybody in this community that would have a real problem with a small monthly charge, as long as that money had to be used for the benefit of the lagoon. And we're moving forward on that, like the STEP system. I am proud of our community in many respects. When it came to children buying flavored tobacco, we were one of the first to say we're not going to tolerate that in our city. And I think one of the wonderful things about Vero Beach is we've been willing to change into the modern world with our zoning and everything else, but to keep Vero Beach, Vero Beach. And we have been willing to lead. You know, I go to forums with other cities and they say, well, we look to see what you do. And we come back and think, you're right. And Vero Beach has been a leader, whether it's in the environment, whether it's in zoning, whether it's in governance. I think we have done a very good job this last year of budgeting. The city is in fine financial shape. We have a very, very good management team, and we have a wonderful staff that does a wonderful job. So those are good things. But, you know, there are things that we have to do or should do, like the lagoon. I think it's our most important issue.
The lagoon is the most important issue the city faces.
Well, you know, I mean, somebody came to me the other day and said, well, the city of Vero Beach can't fix the lagoon by itself. And I was with Senator Nelson recently, and it takes all, and he's helping us. And certainly our state senators have helped us. It takes all levels of government. But it takes all levels of government. That doesn't mean that it's like what we were talking about in the world. Somebody has to be willing to be the leader, and people have to be willing to go ahead in defense efforts, as an example. And I will tell you that the grass off this house right here is alive. And it's alive, I think, in large part to the commitment of a place called Vero Beach. And you get north of you get the area between Sebastian and, you know, off Indian River Shores, and the lagoon is in much worse shape than it is here. So, you know, we can't fix the entire lagoon, and indeed there are three problems in the lagoon. What's wrong in Mosquito is very different than what's wrong here. What's wrong here is very different than the outflow, which we're really not affected by coming out of the, you know, down in Stewart and so on. But we can do what we can do, and we can show leadership. And I think we've been willing to do that, and we'll continue to be willing to do that. And we can't fix it by ourselves, but it can't be fixed without us, if that makes sense to you.
It does. It makes perfect sense. So in addition to possibly forming a utility authority and a stormwater authority, what else do you see the council addressing in the coming year? What issues are important for the council?
Well, that's a good question. I don't come up with an immediate response on that one.
Well, let me ask it in the context of the budget. The budgeting process that's concluding right now. Some decisions were made to cut money here and to not cut money there. You didn't, as you said, you didn't win on every point. What would you maybe revisit next year?
Well, there's one that we did revisit, and that was resuming normal lifeguards at Humiston Park, which is, you know, in the top 10 beaches in the United States in one publication at least. Family beaches, that is. And we did resume that, and there were 3 of us that voted for that, 2 that voted against. And it made no sense to me to start lifeguards an hour later where the children are, and cut it off 2 hours earlier, because that was something we did in the height of the economic panic in this country, to continue that. So we did fix that. I've addressed the baffle boxes. I mean, I think you have to accomplish them. The other one is the streets here. You know, this year we're only putting $200,000 into the streets. We know that it takes $600,000 a year to keep the streets up. So this year we're living on borrowed time. More than that, the number may not be correct, but it was between $260,000 and $70,000 we have coming into the budget, which is a bit of a windfall this year. So the budget, first of all, went up a bit because the property value is going up. But this money is coming from liquidation of our self-insurance trust fund, because what we decided was we shouldn't really be running entities like that with our history. And so we are paying for insurance outside. And so we have for 5 years, I think 5 years is correct, we have a return of money we're never going to have to spend. So that padded the budget also. So I think you have to be concerned with capital improvements into the future, namely the streets. A lot of our buildings are fundamentally very old. As an example, River House is an example, but the one that worried me the most is Leisure Square, which is important. It's important to provide that kind of service to people that use it, that need it, that can't, that it's economically viable for. So I think the city has got a capital improvement needs. Another one we would like to address is the sale of the old Dodger Town golf course. First of all, we owe money on it. It's eating up $600,000 of cash every year in the form of having to make a debt payment on something we can't possibly use. We need to get out from underneath that. We've asked the county to help us. We've asked the county to help us on a number of items, but we've asked the county to help us. They've indicated that they might, but they want this, they want that, which is kind of the story. We've asked them for help on the lagoon. We want to use their code enforcement officer, who's a specialist in fertilizer and runoff. And even though we're already paying for it because we're county taxpayers, it's been many months and we can't get a response, and we've offered to pay additional money.
To have that person work within the city?
Yeah, work within the city, yes. I mean, what's the good of having regulations you can't enforce?
So they don't, the county's code enforcement officer on the fertilizer ordinance does not work within the city?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the beach sand. I mean, the county takes the money from the tourist tax, which 57% comes from the city, and all the sand goes actually north of the city at this point in time, and has for several years.
You mentioned wanting their help in terms of getting out from underneath the Dodgertown property. Do you mean financial help or just an agreement to?
All we need is them to remove some deed restrictions so we can do what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. And they haven't yet acknowledged. It seems to me there's this uncooperativeness between the city and the county. Never mind the Public Service Commission complaint that the county has filed. But set that aside, but these other issues where there's this lack of cooperation, what is that about?
It's the push me, pull you. You see it in Washington and you see it in Tallahassee. That's the fundamental problem. But I think I would like to see a lot of that go away, because we are county taxpayers, and the county seat is in Vero Beach, and I think that's one of the reasons I'd like to see electric utility authority, because it gets rid of a point of contention. We don't need point of contention. And people have said to me, well, look, your services are used 60 or 80% by county people. Our parks, Humiston Park, you name it, Con Beach, are used majority by county people. And I say, great, have them come. Our stores, our fine restaurants, our hotels, all the things we have are majority used by county people. And I say, great, we're glad to have their business. We're open for business here. We changed our drinking hours. We are allowing drinks to be served in front of the good hotels on the beach. It's good for business. And the reality is Vero Beach couldn't afford to be the wonderful place it is without this money coming in. I mean, look at it this way. Could we really afford the museum without our neighbors to the north and Indian River Shores? And the answer is no, we couldn't.
Or the theater.
Or the theater.
Right.
So, but I think we all need to grow up and understand our place in the world. And this is a community, a tight-knit community, that has people from the mainland and the beach, and we feel exactly the same. And we want our town, and we want it to be special, and we want the things we want. We want the best in police protection, and by golly, we're going to have them.
Just as a wrap-up, if I may, looking toward the election this fall, what are the important considerations to you in this coming election?
Well, what I ran for, and have been running for, and served for, and the reason at the end of my long career, I was in the Army 2 years in the beginning, I've served to serve something, an idea, and the idea is keep our Vero Vero. In other words, keep some of the nuances and flavor of old Florida. Have it small town America. Have it a complete community. And a complete community means we have all factors of the community. We serve the homeless. We have people that aren't so well off. We have wealthy people. But to keep it, my family came here in 1971, and Vero Beach has actually improved a lot since then. I mean, the museum has been built. There's so many. The Royal Palm Point has been done. So many things have been done, and as you told me once, without development, we'd all live in tents. So development isn't bad, but the development has to look and act and fit the spirit of the community. So what I'm here to do is serve the spirit of the community, and quite frankly, there are those that are running to serve themselves for one cause or another, or they're serving some ideological cause like small government or something. You know, limited government is good, but if the public wants it, small isn't good. I mean, we've gone from 526 employees next year to 396, and we've kept the services up. But you know what was attempted was to get rid of services like 911 and go to 17-minute reaction time, and I can't be for that. So there's one candidate that has an ideological view of the world. There are a couple more that are there to serve themselves. I think there's some very good candidates that if you listen to them carefully, they're here to do what the public wants and keep this place special. And I think the public's going to have to listen for that, but I think it's fairly obvious. What scares me is that people need to pay attention. Look, people, if you want this special place to be the special place it is, we need your involvement, we need your concern, and we need you to listen and pick the right candidates. We really do. And we need you to serve on the commissions. We need you to come to the city council meetings. You don't have to agree with us. We want to hear what you have to say. This is your community. That's why we have home rule.
I don't know of anyone who gives more thought and energy to preserving Vero Beach as a special place. I thank you for your service to the community, and I thank you for your time this morning, Mayor Winger.
My pleasure as always, Mark.
Thank you.